So hi everyone, I'm Vicky Hanna and I'm your trainer for tonight. We are delivering Certificate 4 in youth work and we're starting a whole new unit. So for those of you who are recently joining HADA, welcome. And for those of you who are watching in remote, we will make it as relevant as we can. We have a group of learners here tonight and their conversation and collaboration is really important in this space as well. So I will open it up to the group. We might do an introduction. Just tell me your name if it's not there up on the screen, which we can see. Also, if you are already working in this sector or would like to work in the sector, and then what state or territory that you're in. And we'll do an intro and give us a check-in number if we can. Start with you, Olivia.
Okay, so I'll probably check in at a 7. I'm in WA. What was the other one, sorry?
Are you already working in the sector or would you like to?
No, I'm just starting to get into it.
Great, terrific. And Matt, over to you.
I'll check in at about an 8 tonight. So had a pretty good day. I work at a primary school with young people and in the wellbeing space. So really looking to add to my skill set and get some formal qualifications so that I'm eligible for more work like this in the future. And I'm in South Australia.
Thanks, Matt. Scott, over to you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Scott. I'm from Queensland. I'll check in probably at about a 6 today. I sort of work in the sector. I'm a chef in a school, in a flexi school that focuses on trauma-informed care. But my kitchen has an open door policy, and the young people seem to want to cruise in and have a chat with me fairly often. It was actually their idea that I studied. It was the young people saying, "Why isn't Scott a youth worker?" So I followed it up.
Wow, that's great. I did not know that. Thanks for sharing that, Scott. And Sammy.
That sounds pretty cool, Scott. I'm about a 6 tonight. I've got a cold, so if I might be on and off screen, but I will be here for the whole night. I'm in Victoria and I'm studying to get into the sector.
Great. Well, that's good. So we're just doing an intro tonight, Mario. Rather than only our number, we're going to say our name, whether we're working in the sector or would like to work in the sector, and then what state or territory that you're sitting in. So can we get you to share something?
You're right? Sorry, you're throwing deep in.
You're good.
That's good. Yes, so I'm a bit late. My name is Mario, yes, and I'm from Victoria. And no, I'm not working in the sector at the moment, but I have had my fair share of work in churches with youth. You know, I've always been the youth has always been attracted to me. Yeah, you know, they think they can relate with me, and although youth these days are like, you know, a lot to handle, especially now, you know, with having vapes everywhere. You can walk into the library and they can have vapes in the library, you know. So I noticed that today, something we didn't do back in our day. But anyway, so yes, and that kind of like stirred like my curiosity, where I said, wow, if I'm able to help all these youth without credentials, you know, I wonder what I can do if I do get into, you know, industry where I can have a bit more resources to help them, you know. And so yeah, you know, I've got my fingers crossed, you know, hopefully I can, you know, make a little bit of difference, put my little grain of sand, you know, to the world, and yeah, if I can get our means, you know, ends, how can I, what's that? Make ends meet. That's what I'm trying to say. Make ends meet as well, you know. So that'll be, yeah, really good. So
sounds great. Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing your story. So I think it's good we jump into class, we're remote. we're all working from home or an adult class, but I think it's always really good to kind of know who are our tribe when we're in here, and that connection, rather than just be faces on a screen for everyone. Look, I am introducing this new unit, session 1 of 3, and it's really heavy going. I am going to do a particular trigger warning intro around this as well, this particular one. If at any time that you feel that you're a bit uncomfortable, or that it's stirring up something for you, please go off camera, do some self-care, stay there. If you think I can handle audio, not the visual as well, look after yourself in that space. But this is about learning about it, then it's about dealing with that and how do we apply that and care for ourselves. So a lot of youth workers will experience stories. If they have 6 clients in a day, that can be back-to-back story, layer upon layer upon layer. And we talk about trauma, but we also talk about vicarious trauma, which is when we hear the story of other people, it leaves an imprint on us. Because we're asking them what happened to you. And so this is when it starts to get a much deeper conversation. And if this is your first unit and you're new to HADA, then please go gently. But mostly we've got people who are experienced in this space jumping in tonight. So let's have a look at, and thank you very much. I'm checking in as a solid 7. I'm learning a whole lot of new things. So I'm not overly confident when I'm in that space. I'm out of my comfort zone a little bit, but I have amazing support. I work for a great organization and a really good team. I only need to ask, and we all get stuck, but we don't stay stuck. So always something new. We like to get out of our comfort zone. So solid 8 like that. Thank you so much, Matt.
I was just wondering if Scott got a new fidget spinner.
Oh, yes, I was curious too. Not yet?
No, not yet. No.
Oh, gosh, I feel like I should post something to you. You don't get out much.
No.
Back up the truck and everyone sends something to Scott now. I can see that coming. So that might be tricky. So we did all
I'm surviving all right with it, without it.
Okay. Well, your hands are busy with your kind of work anyway, so that's always good. So, okay, so let's do a little bit of sharing on our screen. Jumping into this space. This particular unit. So we are recording. Yes. And I'll just expand that screen for everybody. The PowerPoints you have access to as well. This is only one PowerPoint rather than all coming separately, but it's around 90 pages. So it's the one block of material that we're working with. Just move us just for the sake of this so I can give you the title that we're working with. So it is session 1 of 3, CHCYTH016. And as you go up in numbers, it's just saying that this is the version, and this also sits across diploma level as well, just so that you know that while you're doing a certificate 4, Cert 4 is very frontline, first responder type work. The diploma level is that going into that subject matter expert. Some of the units you do also sit across the diploma level as well. So respond to critical situations. So we're going to be filling in incident reports around a critical incident. We're going to be responding to that of a very high and complex need target group and the problems that they present with. So let's have a look. I will do our acknowledgement to country. So at HADA Institute, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we work, study and live, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We celebrate the stories, the culture, and traditions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders of all communities who also live on this land, and those lands have never been ceded. So let's do a little bit of welcome. Gosh, where am I going to put us tonight? Over here, I will. Okay, we'll move around. So a little bit of housekeeping. It's an adult space. Keep your cameras on unless you need to look after your bandwidth or you're caring for yourself. No smoking on camera, but definitely off camera. I'm not telling you how to do that. If you find that there is something that's unsettling for you, so we can have, not always is the word trigger, that is absolutely at one end, but we can have an effect on some of the content, and then also what is our response around that. So we can have unsettling. So when we do our check-in of 1 to 10, 1 is, look, I'm here, I'm feeling a little flat. 5, it can actually be good, depending on who we are. Not everyone gives like a high number, but 5 can be right in that window of tolerance. I'm level. And then those who are feeling more energized and coming in an energy level, depending on your day and where you're up to and how your own health is traveling, then we may sit above that, and it may not be a lot above that. And when someone checks in, that's our self-reflection space as well. So if you're feeling unsettled and you notice a significant drop, if I was going to do a check out, if I came in at a 7 and I'm checking out at a 3, do that and go, right, I might need to unpack some of that, do something that I enjoy, pat a dog, read something that's pleasant, watch a favorite TV show, do some breath work, things like that to look after yourself. And if you're still struggling, then you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14, and you can say, I'm studying and some of these topics are a little bit uncomfortable. I just wanted to unpack some of them, and they're highly skilled in debriefing you. So if you were in the workplace, you might do a debrief with a colleague, or you might go to your supervisor and they would do that with you. And then sometimes we externally will have what we call professional supervision, where there's somebody who oversees that. So I've had the same PS for 15 years, and I've never met them face to face. It's always been remote. They're based on the Gold Coast, but their skills are exactly the skills that I was looking for. So I went shopping for my professional supervisor, and it's something that I do for myself. Even if an organisation provides it, I like the privacy that I have with that person. I know it is private and confidential, but this way I just have another layer, and I prefer someone who doesn't live in the same town as me as well, because I live in a regional area. And it's a small enough planet without going to those people in a local level. The unit that we're doing is heavy going, but you are in a safe space and a safe environment. And for the point of traveling through these discussions, I'm going to sit in that role as both your trainer and assessor. And I'm also going to be someone who you could report to as a supervisor if you wanted to unpack, how would I handle that? What would be a good way to do that? The assessment requirements for this is we've got a couple of role plays, and you've got some documentation that you need to fill in, which is absolutely a requirement around reporting incidents. So this is all the action space we're in. So how do we identify critical situations in youth work? And by the end of the session, we will be able to define the causes of and the critical situations and the roles and the responsibilities that sit around our work as a youth worker. So this unit really is about you, your tools, your thoughts. We hear about following policies and procedures and working in the organisational guidelines. This is about skill development. So we've done our icebreaker, our check-in. We did an intro, we introduced ourselves, and we did our check-in number, which is self-reflection. So what is an incident? Okay, we can have a discussion about that. So it is an occasion or an event or an instance of something happening. So in the sector, the language that we use would most likely be there's been an instance or an incident has happened, and we might say there has been an event. And that could be a physical thing where someone's injured themselves while they're in one of your programs. We've had an event, had a critical event. And this is not us guessing, is this high risk? This is the space that we're going to be traveling in, of something happening, our response and skills in that space, how we look after ourselves, what are our rights, and then also what are our responsibilities. And an event or an occurrence that is either unpleasant or unusual. Can we be triggered as workers? Absolutely, 100%. Can we be impacted in a trauma way? So when we talk about trauma-informed care, TIC, then this is how do we care for ourselves, and then how do we care for our colleagues as well. So it's an incident that causes significant psychological or emotional stress. So a psychological injury is an injury and it sits under a workplace health and safety incident. Some people, sorry, I'm just going to pop you over here. Some people will, gosh, I'll move you again. Some people may have to even take time off work. And so the record management around this is pretty important. Can we prevent some critical incidents? Yes. Can we prevent them all? No. Have we been around them? Some of us may have. And then what is the impact of that after that event? So a psychological or an emotional stress. And because if we work from that space of the body keeps score, then if we don't debrief, if we don't unpack that, if we don't get the proper counselling and support, we will have that leave an imprint with us physically. And you might go, gosh, you know, it's really good in a crisis, but this can sneak up on you. And when it sneaks up on us is when we're under the pump, when we're under a bit of stress, good stress, you know, meeting deadlines, running around like crazy, doing more than one thing. It could be that there's been something that's impacted you completely separate to work. And this is when this comes up for us. So it's cumulative, which means that this could have been sitting for months and months and months. And then something can happen and it brings it back into front and center where we are re-injured. And then that would be viewed as a triggering event. So what are the causes around significant physical injury? Has the potential to cause the above significant impact, so psychological, emotional, or a physical injury. Let me just move everybody over here. So this is what we're referring to. This is the classification. Sorry, I'm just move everybody over here. Could result in damage to property and could cause damage to reputation, your own and the organisations. So when we talk about reputational damage, if there's an incident in a program that you're running, there is a public perception. If it hits the media, and I can tell you I have been on the absolute difficult end of that on several occasions, and from a personal perspective, because when you have a position like that, especially when you work in the sector, if you've got a family member that's identified as having their own challenges and that the media love to, you know, report on certain things, then that can have a very significant impact on your reputation and the reputation of the organisation that you're with. So your colleagues and your support, how things like that are heard, how they are managed when you've got a pile-on or you've got groupthink. The media are only interested in getting comments, clicks, keeping it in the front and center, talking about youth crime crisis and this failing, you know. I know that they're reporting about things that are of interest to the public arena. However, it isn't always the lens, and the people involved in it may very well be your client. So we look after people who are victim survivors, but we also look after and support offenders as well as youth workers. So there's a backstory of what happened to you, and all the information is not made available. However, you do need to be resilient in that space. And this is about your rights and your responsibilities. So what is a critical incident in youth work? Okay, so I'll throw this up for us. Can you define critical incident from a youth worker perspective? Can you give examples? And can you give examples of possible causes, critical incidents in youth work? I'm going to put you into a breakout room for just these three questions. And I am going to just pop us out of here and stop our sharing. And we're going to unpack that question. And so what is a critical incident as a youth worker? What do you think that might be? And I'll throw that back up again before we go into breakout rooms. And what would be the causes that sit behind that? So you're identifying and you're responding, and like, how would we deal with that? So let me just make sure that when I put you into the breakout room, you can just show you that so you can get a screenshot of it, if you like, and you're all going into the one breakout room. So the three questions that you're going to cover in your breakout room is, and you might divide it up where I'm going to talk about this one. When we jump out, I'm going to talk about this one or this one. Can you define what a critical incident is from a youth worker's perspective? Can you give examples of critical incidents in youth work? And can you give examples of possible causes of critical incidents? So I want to talk about what you think may have caused that, or what might even go a little deeper and could be the root cause behind that. So there's no right or wrong answer in this space. So can you define it? Can you give an example? And can you think of what would be a possible cause in that space? So I'm hoping that you have that. And I'll stop sharing. I will open it up. Just double check that. Yeah, so I will open that up and stop recording now for everybody, and I'll leave that back up on the screen. And I'll hit pause, and everyone will come back up to breakout room with the discussion and the findings around there, and our key takeaways and an unexpected learning. Okay, great. So everyone's just coming back from the breakout room, and the questions that we had around those topics is, how do we recognize it? What might be the cause, and examples of each of those? So what is trauma? So could we just open it up to the group? It's a small group, and see where we are with that space. Who'd like to start? What do you think trauma is?
We just talked about, we're sort of really, I guess it was just going over what you covered earlier, Vicky, like with the slideshow about the fact that it's an incident, it's led to like an unusual or an unpleasant situation. It could be, you know, people could be like fearful or scared or angry. So that was sort of what we decided was a significant critical incident.
Yeah, it could be psychological or physical harm.
Yeah, that was the other thing too. And then we sort of talked about a couple of examples. So one was like a somewhat like serious attempts of self-harm, and whether there's something that happens to the young person, whether it's something that's actually triggered them or an incident, whether they've arrived where they are already heightened, or whether there's someone or something that can upset them or trigger them, or maybe even that they haven't been taking their medication, and so therefore they're not coping or responding as you might anticipate them to. And yeah, I guess that covers the causes a little bit too. Probably the or not probably, but like sometimes if the people have suffered previous traumas, then sometimes those, you know, what on the surface look like things that aren't like a massive deal can actually trigger quite a critical incident because of their past traumas.
Yes. Re-injury, re-traumatize, and
Yeah.
another psychological injury on top of already sensitive. So if we relate it to our physical, if that's a sensitive spot, you're just like, oh, bump that spot, you know, like it's never been the same since. We can relate to that when it's physical, but when it's psychological, we can't always see it. And what would happen? So people who have had sudden, it's usually sudden, unplanned, unexpected. Yes, it is an incident. Yes, it is unpleasant, can be unusual, can be life or death. Responses: fear, scared, angry, depending on how we respond to those things. Psychological and physical harm that it can do, shown as self-harm. So that might be something that we notice about a client that comes in. It's like, oh, what happened to you, or what is happening to you right now? Very important to know, like, is it historical? Or is it something that is currently still happening? Like, are they living in an unsafe environment where they will never be able to recover while they are re-traumatized and re-injured on a daily basis? So that's how young people are presenting. And then the response may be impacted due to medication, so things that do help them stabilize. And this could be they're acting out because so there could be something that makes sense around it, and or could be drug affected. It isn't always illicit drugs, but it can still be drug affected, alcohol induced and affected, sleep deprived, battle fatigue as well, and then re-injured. So we're in that traumatic space. So if, say, when we talk about mental health, post-traumatic stress disorder, we talk about after the incident. This is about during, and then the after is how you come through that. This is about you as a youth worker, where there can be someone who can read something and they haven't even been involved in it, but they read something on a document. It can be enough to stir something that they had buried years and years ago. They just don't know where it is because the body keeps score. There's so much work written about this, that the walking wounded is a term that often gets used in the sector, is that when we know their story, it's like we must go gently. We must be responders in this space. So we do a lot of our work in our thought, like, how am I going to approach this? What might be the best way to do that? But then it has a physical impact on us as workers and a psychological impact as well. So how we care for ourselves, how we use a reflection journal, how we unpack those things to make sure that we shake that off. You can't change the circumstances, but how it is responded to when someone hears you has a big impact on how quickly you can recover. So just because somebody has a traumatic event doesn't mean that they're always going to be harmed. It's about the recovery in that space. It's about getting the proper work done. If I get debriefed, if I have professional supervision, if I keep a reflection journal, if I get good sleep, if I watch my water intake, stay hydrated, if I meditate or I pray, or I'm doing things that make me feel good, that mindfulness and well-being, they're the sorts of things that is about recovery. They're the things that we need to do for ourselves. So when we do that beginning around the housekeeping, when we come into class, like if something triggers you, then it means something. It's like, what am I doing in that space, rather than here's a conversation. Okay, that's great. All right. Anybody else want to add something in there?
Yep. One of the unexpected learnings that we was the noticing sometimes how calm we can get when we find ourselves in a situation like that. Like when you said when you saw the guy coming in the corridor was like either fight or flight. But in your case, you found out something about yourself. You started walking towards that person. So yeah, it kind of like gave me an epiphany where one time I was like that as well, where I was giving a guy a lift, and I thought that he wasn't uh, consuming drugs anymore, but then I found out that he was being awake for 3 nights, smoking methamphetamines and all that, and then he started acting weird, where he asked me nicely for a lift. He said that one of his friends' daughter just died, so he just wanted to go drop off some flowers. And then I thought I'll do a nice thing, so I picked him up, but I didn't know that he's been awake for 3 nights, like reading the Bible, like smoking methamphetamines. And when he was in the car, he started acting funny. I could feel this bed. I could read the room, like you said. He was very like tense. I thought, and then he was looking at the sky, looking at things, and then he would say, then he would start like criticizing the way I was driving, that I wasn't going the speed limit, this and that, and then I felt unsafe. That, and I'm talking about this guy is like the guy that you described as well, like very muscly, one of those guys, the jailbirds that they call.
Yep.
And then I thought to myself, my God, the first thing I was said, I've got to drop this guy off like immediately. But I didn't want to like seem like, oh, I'm gonna stop here, bro. I'm gonna kick you out, this and that, because he could. I could tell that it was kind of walking on eggshells. That thing that anything could happen. So I don't know how I did it, but we went in front of the house. I made sure when he dropped the flowers, he came back in. He was talking like a lot of nonsense, and then I was like, I couldn't wait to get him in front of the house. And I go, bro, I gotta get up early tomorrow, so I'm just gonna drop you off here. And he goes, yeah, all right. And then he started like, oh, thanks, for the lift, this and then I'm thinking, mate, come on, and we just want to get to the front of his house and just drop you off, mate. I've got nothing against you, but you're not all there. You know what I mean? So I found myself that I can be calm in situations like that, even though on the inside I was saying, my God, I just want him out of my car. So that's,
Mario, can I ask you, how did you feel after you got him out of the car?
oh my God, I felt relief. And then I said to myself, I'm never going to put myself in a situation like that, because they could lie to you. They go, no, I'm not doing these things anymore. And it's like, yes, I felt relief. Yeah, I felt relief.
Relief was the
And
first thing. Were you aware that could have gone very badly?
oh yeah, I felt that straight away.
Yeah.
I felt that it could have gone very bad.
Yeah. So that
Yep.
sounded to me like you had good presence of mind, and rather than escalate it where it would become unpredictable, he would meet you where you are. So we talk about co-regulation with somebody in that space. So if someone's really heightened, then if we are calm, then they will
Get calm.
Energy. So we talk about calm in the eye of the storm, or I'm good in a crisis. We don't, because our survival instincts, we actually don't know whether we are fight, flight. There's a couple of versions of that, by the way, but there's fawn and freeze. They're the polite ones. There's another one. There's flatulate as well, which is like someone might drop their bowels, or you'll, but it's an involuntary response. There's a couple of things. It's like when Australians use that term, oh, I nearly something myself, they're actually talking about a trauma response. So things can happen that are completely unexpected. A person with PTSD can lose bodily function. It is not uncommon when you're advocating for someone in court that they may have to use an adult nappy because they haven't got control over what is going to be that physical response in their body. And yeah, there's another one which I won't bring up. I'll let you do your deep research around that as well. But the soft conversation would be fight, flight, freeze, fawn in that. And so, but we'll narrow it down and go in a trauma situation, in a critical incident, fight or flight is usually, and we don't know what we do And so, you know, Mario's going, well, I found that regulated space in there because I didn't want to trigger or set him off, you know, so disarming and things like that. But like I know what I would do now, and I did not know that about myself, which quite surprised me because none of that made sense. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
But that's just what happens to you. So has anyone else been in a situation that's called on fight or flight for themselves? Car accidents.
Oh, I think I was in the breakout room. I was telling the guys a story. So I was 14, my brother was 18, and I had a guy, to me, repeatedly, definitely drunk or under the influence of something, came up to the stairs into the door and yelled to wanting to come inside, and he was threatening to come in and shoot my brother as a mistaken identity sort of thing.
Okay.
Weirdly, at 14, my reaction was I actually spoke to him calmly, sat him on the steps because we had high steps and I was worried about his safety. So I sat him down and talked to him, and he eventually actually left. And so I didn't think to call the police or anything like that, but older we didn't have mobiles and the phone was inside. But yeah, my first thing was like try and de-escalate the situation and calm him and make him see what the situation was, that he wasn't perhaps seeing it as what he thought he was.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Were you, on reflection years later, were you surprised that you did that? Was your older brother surprised that you could do that?
To be honest, I don't know if I actually told him what I did. Or my parents. I know I've never told my parents the
You
story.
wouldn't.
No. Years later, I was working on Magnetic Island, and a guy came in. He had a mental breakdown, and he was sitting at the bar playing with bullets, and I chose to go sit next to him and talk to him again. So on reflection, yeah, I think I'll do the same thing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And so it's really important to know that that may be there, what I call residue or an imprint, but with our clients, we are working in that space, what happened to you or what is happening to you. So let me just share, was there anything to add? I like the unexpected learnings. If you haven't, would you be able to guess how you think you would respond? And there's no right or wrong either. This is an instinct thing. There was no thought in that process. The same as like Scott, you didn't think about it, you just did that thing. And that's your survival instinct. So if you're in, you know, born a long time ago, you would go after that mammoth. That's that fight, flight, hunter sort of, that's that thing, you know, like protect and go and get the food and keep everybody safe. And that is, that's our monkey brain going right back when we're thinking about it. So we don't have a lot of control. Training can help, where you can kind of sense, oh, this is coming, or this is brewing, or something going on, what Mario was talking about as we get a little bit older and we're around it. But it has an effect. It definitely has a mental health effect, and we can recover from it very quickly. Would we do the same thing upon reflection? Scott saying yes, I would do the same thing. And so we would like to think that we were safe. I'm not a hero at all but I am very drawn in a situation to head towards it. I have discovered about myself that might need some greater reflection as well. My capabilities may not be there. And what I could do 30 years ago, maybe I can't do that. Maybe my brain says I can do that, but physically I may not be able to do that. Leap tall buildings in a single bound and stuff like that. My friends will say, you're such a ninja. And I'm going, I am a ninja. But that is something I had absolutely no control over. As well. So let's have a look. I'd like to share for you just this document here, a little bit around this, around our share. So I just want to just head back up here. Oops, sorry, apologize. We are recording. Now, this isn't a hater doc. This is research that I would like you to do. If about 75% of what we do is actually, apologize, that's all my other work there, is what we do when we're going to look. So our learner's guide opens up, here's a link, or here's a QR code or something. You can have a look. This is a particularly good learner's guide. And this is a resource for you as a youth worker. So all of your learner's guides are your resources. They're your volumes. You know, you need those. I don't have them as a library of my own, but I can go in and get them. But you've got those learner's guides. That is your toolkit to take into this space. So when we're having a look at this unit, let's look at trauma, how this can become victim to offender, what happened to you. And a trauma-affected young person is a victim survivor. And the root cause, transition in young people who survive domestic family violence. So that's one root cause. Mario, you shared something about drug affected. Scott, I think you're sharing, it was a mistaken identity, but it had the potential for great violence. So we're talking whatever that story was behind, where that person felt justified in thinking, I will deal with this. They went to a property with intent, and you de-escalated at the age of 14, which I'm going to say is pretty incredible. I don't know if I would have done that at 14, but you also co-regulated that person. You helped them find their center. Very important. So this is a document. If you email me, I will email this to you after class. I won't go through it word for word, but what I wanted to do is just show you a couple of things. So in your research, when it goes, go looking and then make it evidence-based, put your referencing in. This is an example of, so we have victim survivors, how young people can be directly targeted by domestic family violence. So what happened to you? What is your underlying historical trauma? And how that it shows is even broken property and injured family members, additional consequences around that. The offender has a role in that cycle, and that of abuse, the trauma affected, the unique challenges that sit around there, which is around unhealthy relationships and survivors of that who are trauma affected. What is the role of us as a youth worker in this space? If we're talking about domestic family violence, we have to have an understanding that we're helping our clients break free from an abusive relationship, even if the offender is no longer there. The injury, the psychological injury is. So there'll be images that come to mind. So Scott, when you see a tall building, similar to how it was when you were a kid, with high stairs and a bit of a landing there, it will bring back an imprint in your memory somewhere about a time that looked similar to that. Mario, you might sense somebody who jumps into your car that's a little bit off, not exactly the same circumstances, but the body keeps score. And trauma is an imprinted memory. Until we make that memory smaller, we won't be as affected for as long. So do I jump when someone comes in? I do. But am I traumatized? No. And am I being re-injured? No, I'm not. The family actually think it's quite funny, because it's like, oh, she jumps. And I'm going, start whistling. So, but I notice it more if I'm fatigued or something like that. So that's about knowing that you have an injury, or if you've broken an ankle, and it's a little weak, that we would favor that if we did extra exercise. Oh, that's sore. It's never been the same since I, jumped off the trampoline or something like that. So we may need to, as a worker, safety first, always, absolutely, no matter what, your safety. However, we're talking about unexpected responses, our survival instincts. We may not think safety, because our survival response could be fight, head towards, flight, run the other way, freeze, I'm stuck, nothing's coming out of my mouth and I can't move, or fawn, actually huddle up and try and be as small as you can, or people please, like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Right, Mario.
Yes, Vicky, just a quick question. I want to ask you, do you think of what happened to me was a combination of two things, where this was actually going on, and the person was kind of like on on a thin line, where you couldn't determine what his behavior would be, but and also a combination of me having trauma with situations like that from the past as well? You think it could be a combination of both?
It
Because
is.
how I
Yeah.
felt the relief.
Yeah,
It
I
is.
think in answer to your question in
It is, yeah.
those two parts, yes, a drug affected person is a dangerous person. A drug affected person will lie. If their lips are moving, they're lying, because they're after
Yeah.
something. And they'll do anything to get that something that's more precious to them than anything else. There is no logic and reasoning in that space. Even an alcohol affected person, they're not in control. So you had a critical incident where the other person was not in control. Therefore, you have no idea how that could go. The other part of your question, do I think because of your own lived experience that sent you into that survival state of calm? I do believe that you have picked up skills, and they are what are the underpinning knowledge that sits there that comes with you. That's why people with some lived experience usually are very good in that space. And we know how to get through to the calm, but then it's the after that. We are still injured, and it may be that our recovery is good because we are survivors in that space, but also your training. You're doing a qualification, Mario, and some of this is sitting with you now layer by layer. The language, the feeling, the underpinning knowledge, that's sitting there.
Yep.
And you may have a lived experience, but now you're getting your training and your skills, the theory and your knowledge around that. It frames it in a way where it's not accidental. It actually has some effort. So you don't have to have been ever in a situation like that to have these foundation skills that you're developing. The survival response, yours was to regulate, because somewhere in your history, you know that if I act out, it will make things worse.
That's right.
So your instinct is to not do anything to make things worse. So,
Thanks, Vicky.
definitely both of those things. Good reflection too, Mario, because I think that's knowing self before we know others is a strength. So we move in here, assess risks and safety. I've just said to you, we don't know how to do that when we're in survival. It actually takes over. What do we do when we're with that client and with each other? Provide emotional support. The first person you tell that to. So I still wasn't coming through a traumatic incident. I still wasn't getting that because I didn't get it from the police. The person who made me feel safe was the young football player who came over into my yard to check if I was okay. That's who made me feel that I was not alone. Not my dogs or anything like that, because I was protecting them, even though they could have protected me. I had all this other stuff running around and I wasn't using. I think another person would have said, let the dogs out, and then it would have been on. but I didn't, and I couldn't, and so I did this other thing. But so the neighbor support, even though he didn't do anything and the police took over and all the rest of that, that meant a lot to me. He always was a great neighbor. They're a lovely young couple, very bad guitarist, because they used to have a band and practice in the garage, but we put up with it as neighbors because they're a pretty good bunch. But I swear he wanted to bring the rest of the football team over and be there quicker than the police would have been there. But that would have created a whole lot of other things. So I had full control. No, all my training kicked in. No, let's wait for the police. It's fine. We know where he is. Everything's okay. But could the other people have come barging in the door any minute? We don't know. And I'm grateful that it didn't, but it still was until the police turned up, and then they would have been watching. But I didn't even know that they actually lived within 100 meters of me the whole time. So when I found out, which was the next day, I called the real estate and I said, you must evict those people immediately. And they did. So, you know, you've got to deal with those things. Like I can, because of my training, I can answer that. I can do a critical incident report. So will you be able to do that if you need someone to respond to that appropriately, who do have the authority? Who are the decision makers about where those people live in a rental property? The real estate. I go to them. And I made sure, because that wasn't just me, that was the safety of everybody else. And on the other corner is a retired police officer who did nothing. So a young guy, a young footy player, is the one that entered that space. So interesting. So promote coping strategies. This is where the healing comes. Protective factors. Have I done everything I could? Healthy relationships with self and others, and foster those with other people. Educate yourself and others on what a healthy relationship is. Advocate for their needs and your own. Self-advocate. Social inclusion. Over the top of everything I do, even if it is an offender, I am present in that space to try and assist somebody. And Scott shared that was a space that he went into as well. Monitor progress and adjust any interventions. Keep an eye on it. So your response in that space as a youth worker, what is our role? Compassionate, unconditional regard, your safety first. Informed support can make a significant difference in the healing process when we hear about it. So if they've come in and they're working with you and they can't regulate your safety, I don't know. I want you to know, though, is whatever you do and you walk into a space, is know where the exit is, that you can get out of there, and also that your colleagues at work are also safe. So Matt, I remember you sharing in one of our previous classes where a kid was having a kind of meltdown, and instead of that child being removed from the class, the other children were removed from the class because they were the priority ones in that space. And it was still helpful for the person who was trying to regulate where they were. So I found that was a really good strategy. And would that be your policy and procedure in a situation like that?
Yeah, I guess so. It's probably more the person that's having a hard time at that time, because they're heightened. Like you can't sort of communicate or reason; they just don't hear stuff. And so the first port of call is to say, okay, well, you know, let's go outside and we'll talk about it. Or you, excuse me, but if they're not in a good place, or they can't hear you, or they're, because of course that means that they need to relinquish some form of control if they're leaving that space. So you just sort of do a quick thing, and if they're not going to move on, or if it's, you know, obviously, like, you know, kids you get to know and you pick behaviors and patterns and that sort of thing. But usually it's just, okay, everybody, let's get out.
Okay.
So and the kids actually the kids actually start to know. So if they see a a student escalating, then when the teacher gives the instructions, they kind of already know what to do. And kids are so cool because they don't judge, and they actually show concern and compassion for the student once they've de-escalated, and are very quick to include them again. And it does traumatize, like some kids are a little bit worried about that student or something like that. So yeah, those responses can be different, but on the whole, yeah, kids just sort of get on with it, I suppose.
Okay, that's good. And because we don't know what's happening for them in their home, and school can be a sanctuary for a lot of kids, that is their soft place to land, then things like that can trigger that same response in them of something that happens from home. If it's loud, noisy, things are being broken or smashed, that's the kind of stuff. So this is what I struggle
we,
with. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. And so as a part of, I guess, the debrief we do with the rest of the class, we do sort of touch on the fact that, you know, sometimes people's lives outside of school are quite different. And so this is why we need to be understanding and patient and compassionate. And, you know, it's not okay for them to have this sort of behavior, but people come from different backgrounds. So we don't go into the details with the students, of course, but the students, I guess, get to understand where our empathy might be coming from.
Yes. Yeah. Care, you know, that yeah, the care and unconditional regard, like what happened to you, what is happening to you is the space. So what I struggled with last week, because I couldn't get my tech to do what I wanted it to do. But what I wanted to do is to show this regulated space where we would get in comfort, safe, and fully present. And then if we're heightened, you know, that hyper arousal, this is where we can be having a trauma response. So it's over the edge and activated, and then the flat, which sits in that freeze and fawn, which is, you know, like it's unfamiliar but safe. It's sensing something could be brewing, not quite sure. This is the safe space here, but we'll either go down, which is our survival response. It'll also be how we feel in that space as well, over the edge and then activated. So then really low. So yes, we're good. Maybe we can come back up. Maybe over the edge, and then too late, we've got there. So rather than there's an expression like bounce back, we say bounce forward out of that space back to the center, and that is where we co-regulate. So if, say, someone's throwing themselves on the floor and they're just doing whatever, I will lie down on the floor as well. Kids, we're co-regulating in that space. But if someone is lashing out and things like that, I will be super calm, because if I stay there, I'm not going to amp anything up. But if there's weapons involved and things like that, you must know how to respond. You're going to have to write about it, and we're going to have to write a critical incident report. So then we have what is the impact of childhood trauma. So it's cognitive, physical health, our emotions that sit around there. So it's an emotional thing. Sorry, just move that over a little bit. Oh, no, I won't. Okay, let's go skinny. Emotions, what things pop up, relationships, it impacts everything, mental health, behavior, and then the brain development as well. So impaired readiness to learn, and difficulty being able to solve problems, language delays. It impacts children in this way because they are trauma survivors. And then how people disassociate from the trauma, which is also another response. And we may do that as well. These are different to our fight or flight response as well. So disassociation, that's a spectrum as well. It's not like up or down like the window of tolerance. This is actually everyday disassociation, which we all do, like just zone out kind of thing, don't want to know. and dissociative mental health difficulties. So on that scale, it could look like daydreaming, zoning out while driving. We go into that alpha brain frequency, or like drying your hair or going on the toilet or having a shower, doing things without really thinking about it. And then it might be that as we move in high concentration, PTSD sits there right in the middle of that spectrum. Complex PTSD, that also sits there in the middle. Complex meaning that it happened in those developmental early young people, so the clients, our primary clients that we work with as youth workers. And then how we depersonalize and derealization, and then the did, you know, like this is where we want to go. So a dissociation disorder is a mental health issue, difficulty, or can become a mental illness in that space. So that's a document that I would like to share with you, and that's that co-regulation. It's a lifelong need for young people, teens and little ones, to find someone they can co-regulate with who doesn't trigger them and make them feel weird. So how we present ourselves, how we look after ourselves is very important. A child is born with a sympathetic nervous system. A parasympathetic regulation happens through mother. I don't agree with that. I believe that any caring person who they feel bonded to, not every child grows up with a mother or a father. It just needs to be an adult that is caring and that they feel bonded to and safe. So that's that parasympathetic. There's a lot of people who do really good work as foster carers. There's a lot of grandparents who will step into that space for whatever reason. There's a lot of people who are in the education system in roles that they do. And even when we are in that youth worker, even though, Mario, you're not working there, you're the accidental counsellor when you're out there. It just happens. And so we refer to that as an accidental counsellor, meaning we just seem to be in the right place at the right time and people gravitate to that. And so we call that soft outreach. It's just there and present where people will come and talk to you about things, or we notice things about other people. So because of its evolutionary ties, part of our monkey brain and developmental stage, human to human co-regulation is the most powerful calming agent. So a wellbeing officer in a school, a person who goes and volunteers somewhere, a chef in an alternate education program, a parent, a neighbor, a friend. So when we're talking about trauma, the person who co-regulated me in my incident was my neighbor. So that can be any human who steps into that space of unconditional regard, who sees you, hears you, believes you, makes you feel safe, safer. Not always safe, but, and if we have that, and as a youth worker, you will provide that. If our clients have that, their recovery about that is actually really powerful. Without being believed, without being seen, without being heard, it moves people into that high risk state of helpless, hopeless, and alone. The person who was affected by the trauma, or the person who is working with the trauma affected person. So I just wanted to be able to share that with everybody around that space. I might get rid of that. Stop sharing. Okay. So unexpected learnings, calm in the storm. Love that, Mario. Great. So let's have a look at what that looks like and how we took that into our breakout room. We have fully unpacked that exit. Oh, okay. More haste, less speed. Okay, I'll bring everybody back. Thank you so much for your input on that. It's valuable. We went through what is a critical incident for a person who is in youth work, and you're studying it, and a lot of learners will actually apply for work while they're currently undertaking their studies. That's usually enough for a lot of organisations. They'll ask you, which units have you completed? This will be one of those 4 ones. So will be the communication one as well. So how young people react, we've covered all of that. Causes of trauma, we're ahead. Emotional responses, we're ahead. Shock, detachment, fear, anger, sadness, helplessness, shame, or guilt. A lot of survivors have survivor guilt. It happened to them, but it didn't happen to me. Our physical, social, and physiological responses as well. How other people perceive that to happen. How does it turn up in our body, where the body keeps score? How do we notice? Oh gosh, I'm starting heart palpitations. We'll sense something that will start to come in. We may withdraw, functional difficulties, concentration issues, change in relationship, isolating, pulling away, disassociating for people. Nobody really understands. I don't want to talk to you about it. You can't help, especially when we have traumatic injury or traumatic death. Not everybody finds that everybody will help them co-regulate. So some people might go, well, you've had plenty of time to get over it by now. If the injury is there, just because other people can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't have an impact. So it's absolutely paramount that you know yourself well enough to know what would I do? What are my behavioral responses? And then how am I caring in my own recovery? And recognize it. Don't have to, I'm tough, I can get through it, I'll suck it up or whatever. Absolutely no way, because it'll turn up in your life and your family and those people who care about you, your friends, your colleagues, your peers. They want to be in that space for you, but not everybody will be able to help you, because a lot of people don't know how to help you. I don't know what to say. I've got no words. I don't know what to do. That's okay. That's what Lifeline's for. Shake it off there. Unload it there. Debrief. Read about it. Oh, what happened to me? There's great books out there. So, Matt, we were talking about Dr. Jessica Taylor, who in her own right is quite controversial and a strong advocate and holds that space, but she's breaking new territory. There's a lot of very snobby psychiatrists and psychologists who don't want her saying things the way she does. But wow, she's an absolutely pioneer in that space, and she's way ahead of the game, because we're all going to have to get in step with not just going to a psych and going, oh, well, you are all wealth of wisdom and you know it all. She's questioning even her own peers in that space, but she's developed the very first trauma book, and they don't want her to have that. They want everyone to use the DSM, which is the one everybody uses. We use this one over here, Matt.
Just on books, you've said the phrase "the body keeps score" a couple of times. Did you say that was actually the title of a book that you thought might be a good idea?
It is. It is definitely. I'm not sure who the author.
I've just Googled it. It's Dr. Bessel van der.
Oh, Bethel Van. So he does a lot of PTSD and trauma recovery, and that book of his, The Body Keeps Scores, has been recommended to me by other people, so I recommend it. And it was recommended to me by the guy who sat after the Victorian bushfires. He sat in that space for 5 years. So he was a first responder trauma counsellor. There was a lot of tragedy in that property, watching pets, members of their family, everything that they built and worked for. The relationship breakdowns afterwards, over 85% of people's relationships broke down who were directly impacted by trauma. Very common as well, by the way, in that space. And then what their coping mechanisms are, increased risk-taking behaviours, use of alcohol and other drugs. He did the trauma around that as well.
Yeah, okay. I just saw it's actually like you can get it on audiobooks and stuff. And that other trauma book too, it's brand new and controversial, but I don't know, it's sort of almost, it's hard to believe that it's a new idea.
I know.
It seems quite intuitive with some of the stuff that she says. So
it is, and it's the language around it. So have you got your book already?
Yeah, I got it for my birthday.
Well, I'm that was my next question. Happy birthday. You must have had a birthday.
Yeah, I did. It was a bit of a weird request from my family to buy a trauma book for my birthday, but I'm about a third of the way through it.
Right. And so what do you buy the man who has everything, kind of like they're stuck for something? Yeah, it's an investment in yourself. You're right at the forefront with it. She does have other material, but that's the one that I knew I had to have. It
Yeah.
will become a go-to language, understanding, you know, instead of therapizing, which she won't do. She won't do that. She challenges herself all the time. She goes, we don't know. We know nothing. And so this is what this is. This is what this is. So the hypo vigilance, we did avoidance, detachment, disassociation, tension. Oh, I'm always on edge. Intrusive memories or feelings. So that's where post-traumatic stress disorder, it means it's our body's inability to cope with a traumatic event. It doesn't mean the event is still happening. It's what happened to us and how our body absorbs that. And if we don't do the healing, it will turn up and show. Increased risk-taking behavior, like, oh, you know, I can do anything, or trying to self-medicate. Responses, we talked about that. We used our own examples, and I gave you one of my own because it is relevant to the work that you're going to. I don't want to talk our way through, but we have lots of varying ways that we respond. And then we have a look at what influences the impact. It'll be the support system that we put in place. That's us as youth workers. It'll be about their history, their previous experience, and the young person's resilience to bounce forward. So rather than stay stuck in that space, and they will be stuck if they don't have an understanding of knowing about what happened to them and having people who believe them and hear them and see them and help them co-regulate and feel safe in that environment. I'll let you watch that video yourself. Okay. Factors and indicators, we covered that. Personal history, I did a little bit around domestic family violence. If you email me, I will email you that document. It's not a hater document. It's a document that I go in and I do just to add a bit more depth around there in that 25% that's kind of missing when it's asking for you to dig a little deeper. If it's not in your learner's guide, if it's not in your PowerPoint slides and you want to go looking, I've gone looking for you. And I've done some summary. It's a stepping off point, but it's not answers exactly. And we can't really copy and paste anything, but it gives you some of the words and a direction to start framing it so it makes sense. So we look for, and this is where Mario is saying angry kind of facial expressions or just wigging out a little bit, signs of intoxication, knowing about the history. Okay, well, that increases the risk. And then any threats or gestures, or sexually acting out. That's another, I'll let you find out that survival response for yourself. I want you to ask, do a bit of research. What are all the fight, flight? I'm not going to go into it, but there are other things. I've given you flatulence, but there's more. And I'll let you discover that for yourself. Factors contributing, personal history, access to resources, mental illness, and traumatic events. Suicidal self-harm, triggers and indicators. Helpless, hopeless, and alone. And I repeat this, and I always will. They are the Bermuda Triangle. If a person feels that they are helpless in that situation, if they feel that it is hopeless, that they cannot get any help or support, and if they feel completely isolated in that space and alone, when all those three things join up, that person is at very high risk of suicide or self-harm. So self-medicating, drinking too much, that's a self-harm behavior. Taking risks, that is a self-harm behavior. These can all be because someone is trauma affected, and the work that we would do is we let them know, look, coming in through the doors and getting help, that takes strength. Let's acknowledge that they are not helpless. Look at this. So we go positive, not deficit. We find something positive in that space. So we give them that space of hope, then we do the healing. What are the external factors? So the matter at the Bondi Mall, that was a person who had been accessing mental health services and had fallen through the cracks and was in a full-blown episode at that time. Primarily, the victims were females because it was more females in that space. There were people who moved towards that to try and ward that person off. There was quite a lot of footage, and not a single person disarmed that person. Now, I know this about myself. I would have disarmed that person. I know how I would have disarmed that person. But there is no judgment at all on the people who took flight. That is their survival response. There is absolutely no judgment. That police officer, their response and their training is move towards it. And that's what she did. And she used her training in that space. Unfortunately, there were fatalities. But if that person had not survived and they were a young person, after they had served their time in prison, they would go into a mental health facility to do that, a criminal conviction, but in a mental health facility, hopefully with the care and treatment. You may end up being that person's youth worker. So we've got to frame it. It is not always victim survivors. We often work with offenders because they go from victim to offender because they have unhealed trauma. They have a mental illness and helpless, hopeless, and alone. There was a story that happened before they entered that public space. Prevalent mental health issues in young people. So young people that we can work with, 12 to 24 is mostly. We may work with up to Gen Y, young parents, but it is viewed as 12 to 24, including the age of 24. So on your 25th birthday, you're considered someone who could have the development to now make decisions. So when I know that there's a young person facing court and they're 18 and everything they've done is really bad, it's quite likely that they won't serve time incarcerated. If they have consistently broken the law and all efforts to work with them have failed and they've come before the court again and again, then it's very likely, it's like, we can't leave you at your own devices. We are going to have to remove you from those day-to-day things that you're not able to navigate. And so you will go into detention. Locking somebody up without treatment, without support, without hope and healing, will have that young person come back out and reoffend. Every day of the week. When you go into detention, young people and adults, there is no rehabilitation. It's the halfway houses that do that. That's why they just keep reoffending. Because they've learnt no new skill, they've broken no cycles, and they have learned behavior. They have to, you can't unlearn it, but you replace it with a new learning. If you've got a habit, you can't break a habit, you have to replace it with a better habit. But you still will be an addict, but you will be addicted to things that are healthier and better for you. So that moves us into the mental health space. So a smoker, a recovered smoker, will often give people lectures about smoking because they want to save everybody because they've done it. So they get a little obsessive about it. People who have body image issues or body dysmorphia, which impacts their self-esteem, they don't see food the same way and they don't see their body the same way that we might. So Matt.
Just on that, like habits and stuff like that, I was doing some stuff the other day and I was trying to remember, you said something about like somebody who is, say, a recovering alcoholic or something, and it's often been referred to as a relapse, but you used a word that was much more positive than that. Do you remember what? Because it was, the inference was that you'd...
Big slip.
Yeah, I remember you using the term speed bump, but I thought there was just like a one-word thing.
Yeah. So, is it a speed bump or a deal breaker? When I'm framing it like that, I go, look, is this a speed bump for us, or is this going to be our deal breaker? Then there's still hope and some agency in there.
Yeah.
When we're talking about harm minimization, or in habits, or we talk about a speed bump, there is relapse, but there's also a slip. It's a slip.
Yeah. Okay.
Now let's move forward from that. So, and a slip implies, and I'll use that term, like, look, you slipped, and let me help you get your balance again. So if someone slips and we catch them, that's the kind of work that we're doing. If we frame it in a language that may not have been what I used, Matt, but that would be what I was working with.
Yeah, it was sort of, I guess a relapse implies that you have to start again, whereas the speed bump is more like it was just something that happens, and that doesn't mean that you failed, but it's actually, we can sort of build from this. So yeah, I was just wondered if you remembered the word. I would look through my notes, but I couldn't find it.
Okay, and it may be on our recording as well, if I
Oh
was
yeah.
at that time. But the reason I use wheels, cars, traffic lanes is because a lot of young people, for their rite of passage, want to get their driver's license. So I keep it, how do I build a bridge when I'm using language with young people, and be relatable for them? So they might learn on a bike with lots of trainer wheels and start off like that. That's the journey. And then it's like road safety, crossing, looking both ways. We bring that into that space because we already know they have those underpinning skills. Not always bike riding. I don't know how to ride a bike. I know what a bike is. I've seen other people ride it. I know that physically it can be done. I had to go once. The clothesline jumped out in front of me and attacked me. So I never got back on that bike again. So in cowboy days, they'd say, get back on the horse. I did not, because that was just something I didn't do. So I've had plenty of people in my adult life volunteer to teach me to ride a bike, and I have very graciously declined. I've got this far, I'll be cool. But if we use that language, I know what a wheel is, I know what spokes in a wheel are, and that's how I do the wheel of life and the wheel of balance. If I say a speed bump, what's a road like? If we hit a few speed bumps, it's better if we kind of slow down and approach it slower. And that's the language that I will use. Like, there's a few speed bumps on that road when we go through, but we can get through it. We're kind of out of our comfort zone. We don't quite know. As slippers, when it's like, oh, you lost your balance. So that's not too bad. I can help you up and around that, or hold on to something that will help you feel steady, which could be, I'll hold on to these habits that I've been developing because that has helped me find that balance. And I may slip, and I may have to start or feel like, but I have learned a lot of things along the way. So then we come at that from a strength base. So it's like, you've done really well. And look where you are now to where you were when we first started working together. And if they go, no, I'm helpless and the whole thing's hopeless, this is the time where we may wade in and say, when I see you, this is what I see. And I tell them, I see a person who is loyal to their friends. I will give them those value-based things. I will give them good news about themselves. I never say more than 3. I may only say 1, and I only ever say it if it's sincere, because young people can smell it a mile off. Scott.
I don't know if I just want to. Yeah, I've used like a shopping trolley analogy. So it's like okay, so a brand new shopping trolley, you're running straight and fine. Even if only 3 wheels are going one direction, you can still load up and it's still act. We might just need to rely on one wheel, and then you're effective and helping people. So I use a shopping trolley analogy for people.
Yeah, that's great. I'll borrow that, put it in my bag of tricks, Scott. Thank you. And we all know how frustrating that weird wheel on a shopping trolley. On some days we go, oh, look at this stupid thing. On another day, that could be the final thing. like smashing shopping trolleys up and running into people and running amok and things like that. That could be I can't even push a shopping trolley properly. That's how hopeless and helpless I am in that space. So very important. And then of course we've got peer relationship problems. So we might hear the term peer pressure, but it's actually peer acceptance when we're in this space as a youth worker. It's about wanting to be accepted and belonging, making connection. So it's not so much that someone is telling them what to do. That would be deficit language that we're working with. That'd be like, oh, so you can't make up your own mind, other people, even though we won't say it like that. Language matters in this space. So if we say peer acceptance is important, I want to belong. If someone gives me, like I've got a promotion recently, and it's a bigger job and it's all the rest of it, but it's amazing and I really value it. But other people will, like in LinkedIn, if you just say I've changed my role and I want you to professionally, but when other people say something positive, I always thank them for that. And I go, thank you from my tribe, I call them. So they're people I've never met, but they're our wider network and connection that we might have in that space as well. So we are part of a community and our clients are part of a community, and we open that circle for them to be part of it. So Matt, you work in a community. Scott, you work in a community as well. And that's often a young person's first experience with the community. So if they can't get that help at home, they will go to somebody else. It just needs to be another caring adult, and it only takes one. And you could be that one. You may be the first person that gave them good news, or today they really needed to hear it. So this is what do? We help them co-regulate, feel safe, and when they share that story, that it is in respectful. So we talk a lot about the language as well. So peer acceptance is really what is driving that. Who am I and where do I fit in? Other factors, haven't got anyone modeling that. We've talked about that, lack of education, awareness and understanding about themselves and others. Why do, and I like to tell young people that story about the frog and the scorpion. Does anybody know the story about the frog and the scorpion, about how the frog and the scorpion are on one side of the river, and the frog looks at it and goes, I'm a good swimmer, but I'm not quite sure I'm that good a swimmer. And the scorpion goes, I'm an excellent swimmer. You can, but if you help me across, then we'll both be able to make it over safely. Anyway, so the frog thinks about it for a while and goes, okay, well, hop on my back, and well, what if you try and kill me when we're going across the river? Well, then we'll both die. That'd be silly. That won't happen. And so frog's going, okay, keep paddling, and then swimming across. They get to the other side. It's quite a hard swim, but the frog did it, and the scorpion got over on the other side. And when they're resting there, the scorpion bites the frog and kills it. And it's in its death throes. The frog goes, why did you do that? And the scorpion said, because that's what I do. We sting and we kill things. So when I say to young people about that story, it's like, because that's what they do. That isn't what we do. And then why would we be surprised that that's what it is? Not everybody is going to come from that same moral compass or values base. Like, which bits do you feel comfortable when you're in that? Well, no, I don't, but I want to belong in it. Okay. Do you think you would be more comfortable if you had a different tribe to hang with and felt accepted and didn't have that struggle internally where you feel anxious about it, and it's making you feel unwell? Well, yeah, look, I've been in trouble, and they said next time they're going to put me in juvie. I'm going in, and I'm going, there's a bit of street cred when people talk about that. Do you know anyone that's gone to juvie? And then I'll talk to them about Dylan Boland, the young boy who had the spit mask put on him, and the media, that reputation that sits around there, and how he's been branded and labelled and in that space. But those who worked with Dylan for many years before and many years afterwards, it was youth workers in a halfway house that finally connected when the timing was right, when he felt safe, when they made connection. And he has shared his story. Will he be a perfect person? No, he is a trauma affected victim survivor who turned offender, trying to turn it around and break that pattern and heal, and not live that life. So there's a lot of very easy public opinion around that. A lot of the young people we work with will feel judged because they are being judged. They can have a violent reaction. I just wanted to take that back to the group, because this is, I feel as if we have covered a lot. This is one complete unit. I feel we have covered a lot in this space tonight. Oh, the trauma. Oh, I bought that for my daughter. The Trauma Cleaner, that book, who is a bit OCD-ish in her cleaning, but loves crime. She loved the book, Scott. She thought that was an amazing book. She wanted to go in and do forensic kind of study and do that kind of work. She has, she's a I Head Towards girl. So yeah, did you enjoy that? Yeah, wow. Okay, right in there in the thick of it. So we are, we've covered enough, I believe, for tonight to unpack the beginning and the foundation around the trauma. In this resource, you have access to it and you can move ahead with it if you would like to. But know that next week, when we jump into that space, we're going to do a lot more work. There is one document here that you will fill in, which will be a critical incident form. And as we break it down, I want you to look at that between now and when we come back together next week. I want you to look at that document and listening to some of the stories that were shared in that space, and maybe watch the video which is embedded. I think it's embedded into it. I'm not quite sure. But have a look at some of those things in the documents and go, okay, I will Google that, or I'll put it in and see if it sits in YouTube. But Scott's just provided the Trauma Cleaner. There will be a bit of a YouTube around that, maybe just a summary around that book as well. And someone may actually even have a video around trauma cleaning. There is a movie out there about the cleaner, and it had a crime around it, and I forget who was in it, but it was a good, probably a wise person who I liked as an actor. That was a pretty good one as well. But I think as we head into this space, the next bit where it's about a violent reaction is not where I want to take everybody tonight without this underpinning knowledge that we had. So I would like to just put it out to the group. Do you now feel at this stage, after week 1, do you feel that you now would know what trauma is? Yeah. Do you know how other people may respond, or curious about how you may respond? And do we know what our role as a youth worker would need to be as we jump into that space? Have you got a bit more of an understanding about what our role is there, how to look after ourselves, knowing some things we have control over and some things are just our survival instincts? And then what would trauma look like in a young person? And because we had that rich conversation, we heard about what would we do in that, and how we would do that. And in reflection, that we would do the same thing again, which is really interesting, because then there's a knowing, and then it's about, why are you all here in this class studying about being a youth worker and learning about trauma, is so that you have a higher level skill to be able to manage that space. So it isn't something that I tell you to be fearful about, and I'm definitely not going into a violent reaction or a situation tonight. But I do want you to, in a safe way, read about the next part in the slide, so that you'll have some language around it, and it won't have all the visual and the audio coming at you. It will be the reading and writing. So when I talk about VARK, how we learn things, VARK, VARK is visual, audio, reading, writing. I know that's not what an R is. And K is kinesthetic, how we learn things. The next bit, I would like you to do a little bit of homework with the PowerPoint slide, to just go beyond the pages that we were and have a look at what is a trauma type incident where it's violent. Read about it before you hear about it or see about that. I don't want anyone to be coming into that space and triggered or unprepared. Could I just ask you as a group, as we're doing our debrief around this, to just pop up in the chat what number you are at the moment, and on reflection, am I feeling still the same number when I came in? Have I dropped a little? Is that an external factor? Or is that because of the content that we're covering tonight? That's part of a self-reflection is, I'm tired, I've had a big day. Sammy's got a cold, she's barely here because it's draining, and she's drawing on all of her energy on a really heavy topic as well. So I'm going to have that point where we can jump out. I'll pause and I will keep recording. So you're going to get me doing some background work around that. You are very welcome to stay if you feel comfortable, but I want to do our stepping out point for the live real time for that. And then I will also unpack some of that stuff for Matt as well. Still an 8, maybe a little higher than when I started, because I always enjoy the class. Thank you. That's lovely feedback. 7, haven't dropped, spot on, barely here, but enjoying the topic. Excellent. That's great. Thank you. Good self-reflection. I'm tired in a heavy topic. Yeah, our body keeps score, Mario. And you've had some changes recently as well. So that's where we go gently. So I even write tread gently. It's on a little notice board in my kitchen on a blackboard. I have to remind myself I can go gently. I don't have to be a ninja all the time. 6, drop by 1, heavy topic and external reasons. Thank you, Olivia. And then I feel like I've learned and gained knowledge, so up to a 7. That's great. So when we're identifying how am I going, self-reflection, is that within me? Okay, what have I got to do? Is that external? Okay, what do I need to pay attention to? And where's my priority right now? So I'm calling it the priority for Sammy is self-care. And if I was working with you in an office and you'd come into work, I go, what can I do to take that workload from you, Sammy? Can you go home? Look, I can't go home. What can I take off your desk to lighten that load for you, so that you're not trying to do your usual work that you would do as an 8 or a 9, and here you are traveling at a different number. That's how we support people in that space. And it's a cold. But remember how we said about the spectrum? You know, we can not be traveling that well because we're tired and overwhelmed, or there's external things going on. It's like, how do we care for ourselves? What do we know about ourselves when we have a need? If no one else is around there to do that for us, then we do that for ourselves. We must do that, or we won't stay in that space. So it might not be burnout, but it could be brownout. And I want to tell us that's what we head into. We've got to recognize it. Can't do this for other people if we don't do it for ourselves. It's a really unhealthy balance. It moves us into people pleasing rather than, people work around youth work. Yes, we can have a lived experience, but we can be resilient and agile and knowledgeable and compassionate and healed and recovered, and show somebody that through how we model our behavior in that space. And people can be quite surprised to hear some things. I'll only ever share things. You definitely do not want my story, but I will share things that if I think it is relevant about that space as well. So when I go out and talk publicly and I speak in those arenas, I do talk about those things if it is relevant. And I've been around other people who have also shared their story simply because, and trauma recovered people, their story inspires other people. As a youth worker, your story may make that person feel that the gap between you and them isn't as wide as what they thought. They might go, oh, Scott's so cool, he's got it all together and all of that. And then they go, oh, hey, I'm human. And they sense that, but they kind of like to know that as well. Like, we sometimes that journey to get here, it can get pretty bumpy. And we've got to make a few detours along the way, but it's how we get back in that game again, how we bounce forward. That's what matters. And do you know what it was? And could you name it? And if you had a chance, would you do it differently next time? And that's growth, that's development, and that's recovery, hope and healing space. So our young people that we work with, victim or offender, survivors, every victim survivor, every offender has been through trauma, every single one. So it would take a mental illness that had psychopathy that you would not be able to work with or workshop your way through. That could take medication and some correctional detention type period of time to protect society, to protect that person from themselves and other people. But there's a whole lot of work to be done around how people respond when something happens. And most young people who are offenders are very negatively judged in their wider community. So look, I will pause our recording. I'm not wrapping up for the night. I will be coming back into this space to just to add a couple of other things, mostly around the theory around that as well. But I will pause the recording for the moment so that those who need to leave the class will be able to do that. And then I will come back with our remaining. Just returning to this space in some of the resources that we're going to need. I'll just pop that up there for us so that you can see me. Just wanted to a little bit of homework before we jump into next week and we come back. This document here that we're working with, just want us to see if I can just make that a little bigger for us in the screen. This document here is about filling in a critical incident form. So what we uncovered with our PowerPoint slides, which you do have access to as well, one of your assessment pieces, and we do have 2 role plays with this, and it is heavy going as a topic, and I respect and appreciate that we need to look after ourselves when we're going through this, and some people have a lived experience as well. However, as a youth worker, what can we do in this space when we're working with someone who is trauma affected, and our response, and making sure that we are able to respond safely for ourselves? So a critical incident plan is consider the young person who keeps coming into the workplace. So demographics means low socioeconomic, maybe housing insecurity, maybe financial hardship, maybe sitting around fractured families, overcrowded dwellings. There's a lot of things that are going on for our young people that have occurred. What's happened to you, what is happening to you, who still come to your workplace, etc., come in and get support and answer the following. What are the possible causes of conflicts in our service, and outline at least 3? So what could they be in conflict with? Like, one of the things that I learned very, very early in youth work is to make sure that if I was working with a low socioeconomic target group, how I dress matters. How I dress might make me more relatable, as well. And it can put distance because we judge people by what we see, you know, can make a first impression in the first 45 seconds. And then that someone could get the wrong kind of message around it. Now, that doesn't mean that we get down in the mud with somebody and join them there, or be flat and join them there. We're trying to be in that middle space, you know, that window of tolerance where we can do the co-regulation work, where it's safe for ourselves and for our clients. So I would drop the jewelry, you know, I like it. But that's me personally. But me as a youth worker, I don't do that. If I'm going to court, I dress as if I belong in court. If I'm going to be working frontline with young people, then I want to be relatable. So I have to think about a lot of uniforms in youth sectors is just wear jeans and then we all wear this one shirt. But what they might not want is a lanyard that goes staff and all the extra badges and things like that on it. It actually puts in a bit of a barrier, and we don't need those. So what we've got to think about is don't be their barrier when they're already facing others, you know, like let's not us be that barrier as well. And that's what it means, like a conflict. So there's conflict in you say that, but then you look like this. You say anyone can, but I don't see anyone here. I don't see anyone like me. So I can't be what I can't see. So if I was a First Nation client and we didn't have posters around where young people that could be in conflict. That's the non-verbal visual messaging. So having a youth-friendly environment means seeing it through the lens of theirs. But what would be a conflict of that? What would be, well, I've got all these barriers up, or I'm dressing like I'm about to go to a business meeting because I might have a business meeting in 10 minutes, but I have to be mindful of how that happens. Also, if they keep coming back to the service, how could they, if I'm mucking around or I'm doing stuff that's a bit sus, well, then I'm a hypocrite and a young person can spot that a mile off. So think about, you know, what are the possible causes of conflicts? Self and the environment, and what strategies can you put in place to anticipate these conflicts and refer to the 3 possible causes of conflict you identified. So we've got to go a little deeper. Provide 2 examples of how you implemented these risk minimization strategies. So when we've got a young person who feels hemmed in, antsy, unsafe in a room, are they the young person that you've got a bit of a garden, a Zen garden out the back wherever you're working, and sitting outside might be, like being in a room could be, they could be in conflict with that space. I just feel hemmed in. So we've got a lot of young people, if they couldn't sit in a classroom, then it's a fair chance they're not going to sit in a small room with 2 chairs 45-degree angle and you counseling them because they're listening stuff, they're talking that way, but the doing and talking when someone feels safe, that could be a thing. So how could we manage that if talking isn't their thing? That could be in conflict. Identify the reasons why a young person comes into the workplace. They're seeking support for counselling program, join a program. Might be accommodation, crisis, emergency, transitional, mental health services, other health services. So sexually, we have visiting sexual health clinicians come in, saves them going to the hospital, but it's looking after that. Education support, so tutoring and things like that, and employment support. So they're the kind of issues that most young people are presenting with, and the work that we would do as a youth worker. More in our plan, types of critical incidents that could occur, have a think about that, could impact the health and safety of all of those in the workplace. So identify at least 5 in that space. You know, not having an exit if you feel trapped and you haven't got a way out. That would definitely be something that I spot it as soon as I walk in, and often our clients will do the same way. If I came in through that door, is that the door that I can get out? quickly if I'm feeling that I've got to. But then if they leave, are they going to run amok as well? So if it's starting to escalate, you have a response around that, making sure that you've got information, provide information to them of possible responses, and then question 3 sits around that support of your team members as well if something happens. Consider the history, any of the potential causes, assess how it impacted or potentially may impact the young person, the client themselves and staff, and then foresee. That means think about every possible scenario that could go wrong, and make sure that you've got a plan, a safety plan around that. What are the documentation? Minimum of 2 potential risks. So critical incident form, section 5 above, for each of them write potential responses. That was the one that we had just before. Now write a response next to each of those, how you would deal with that. That's what it's asking for here. That's what they mean. And then the identify and assess strategies that can be put in place to avoid, so all that prevention, early intervention space, refer to the risk, both young people and staff. For the young person, the risk could be this potentially, and by doing this, it would minimize it. So when they ask these questions, it's like, what are the strategies? What can we use to avoid or minimize each of those in that? And then how does that impact young people and staff? Look at it from both lenses. And you may need to just put those headings in there, those 3 headings. And then for the staff, it would be this. For the young person, it would be that. Unpacking the question when they're like that, there's more than one part to that question. So if you're putting in an assessment and you've missed a bit, I want you to really unpack this, because this is where you're knowing your information and your skills. And I'll refer to this as the underpinning knowledge, your foundation skills here. Who are the people to go to that must be contacted for assistance, and under what situations each person should be contacted? So this is my go plan. This is like, if it's housing, here's the organisation that I would go to. Make it up, or if you've got one in your local area, do that. If it's, here are the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week phone free call numbers, who they would be, and I'd put them there. So I would come up with those strategies and how I would do that. Have a look at your workplace documentation, the forms regarding use of force and restraint. It's against the law to use restrictive practices. What can you do? It's lawful to say to somebody and warn them, please leave the building, please leave the building, please leave the building 3 times. That is your strategy in a critical incident. You're giving them the option to leave. And if you are feeling unsafe, you can say, hand up, stop, I feel unsafe. That could be enough to bring that person back into a space where they pause, they hear that, and there's that moment that they may be able to do that, where rather than escalate, you may be able to say, I want to help you. I need us to be calm. I need to feel safe to help you. And if that doesn't work, then you've got your exit strategy, your panic button, and that. So if you work alone a lot, I would not. I would have a plan. I would have wraparound supports in that, because I'm at work and I can see things unfolding. But if I'm at risk, then I may have that unresponsive type of thing where it just goes into survival mode. This is what I did. I'm fight, or I'm flight, or I'm fawn, or I'm freeze. Knowing that about ourselves, which is why I've covered a lot of that in the first part of tonight's class, and then briefly outline your protocols around it. So a policy is around what you can and cannot do. And then the protocol is how you do that action. So first access will have some examples of that for you. And then identify and outline the equipment in your workplace that is available to support a response. So that could be a panic button, that could be a door that you enter and everything shuts down, and that you may always have that alert with you. I have a button that is an extremely high shrill button that I press, and it gets a lot of people's attention from at least, oh gosh, I think it says it on the thing, but I know that at least 300 meters away it can be heard very loudly. The incident plan template, going on to your supervisor comments, confirm that the critical incident plan achieves the following. So that will be filled in, and the signature of the supervisor and the date. Now that comes out of one of your role plays. So that is the work that you're going to do based on the scenarios that you are given. But I want us to be certain that when we're in this space, something happens, then we have to document it. That could be a part of a criminal investigation around that space as well. You could be witness to a young person who is harmed, or you might be doing an incident report that this is what the young person shared with me. So mandatory reporting usually has documentation, and you may be interviewed by those people in authority around that as well. So heading into our homework, which I would just like to show you of where we're going to be sitting next week, and the work that I would like you to do before we come into this space as well. What is a violent reaction? Okay. What are the factors? The scenario to Sarah's, which is the scenario given as well from the recording, and then occupational trauma and the effect on cells as well. So it has an effect when we say, you know, like if I think there's a risk to self or others, that could be people in the wider community, but you are an other as well. So we mustn't just give that lip service. It's actually a safety plan around that. And you're letting that person know that you're speaking to, but that is the professional boundary that you work within. Okay. If we practice our protocols, they will become natural for us. It's just why we sit in the role play space. We want you to do a lot of them. In this qualification, you'll do at least 11. And that's all skill development in that space. And then you're getting your feedback on how you're going with that. And it's skills based. So know that the assessments are there, but you may be building that underpinning knowledge or that foundation. And then when you feel ready, you will put that into the theory side. And I also want you to reach out if there's any of the areas that we're covering and that you would like to be able to have that one-on-one coaching. Please come back to us and book into Calendly. You've got access to that, and you will get a trainer. Otherwise, reach out in an email and let me know what you're looking for, and I will try and assist you. If your question sits around a unit, this one is CHCYTH016. If it's around that, then tell me which task it might be. It might be, oh, I'm working on the case study, or I'm working on the forms. I'm not quite sure. Ask your question that way so that we can make sure we're supporting you in that space as well if it's around assessment. But otherwise, a one-on-one phone call for some coaching to help you understand, know that that support is there for you. And I'll close off tonight, and we will see you next week. That will be session 2 of the 3, and we're going to start progressing through our PowerPoint slides, which you have a copy of, but we're also going to be doing all of these steps that are involved in the assessment pieces and what we need to know to be able to jump into that role play space. So I'll close off and say good night. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.